Welcome back. Today we are going to go ahead and add the recipes for the backpacks that we created last time, and then in the next part we'll do an actual inventory so that the backpacks can be used like backpacks. So I'm going to go ahead and I've not written this in advance. I'm going to be referencing some code from another mod, so probably going to be doing a bit of refactoring as we go, copy and paste a little bit of it, because a good portion of one of the recipes is just based on a vanilla recipe anyway, so it's copy-pasted code. So what I've gone ahead and done is add this mod recipes class, and we're going to be just registering our recipe serializers, and here we'll come back to that. There is actually one thing I noticed here that we need to fix. So I've actually been doing these events wrong, and I think some of my code or some of my mods are still doing this incorrectly. We actually need to call add generic listener here, and then we need to specify the class. And that will prevent this event from being fired for the wrong registry type. So we can go ahead and go in here now and we can get rid of this condition. That's no longer needed. And same thing here. Okay, so let's go ahead and start working on the recipe. So I typically do crafting.recipe for the package. And we're probably going to be doing two recipes here. But let's go ahead and call this one recolor backpack recipe, something like that. So let's actually take a look at the iRecipe interface. So this is, we're actually going to be implementing iCrafting recipe, but this is the base interface for all recipes. If you're doing any kind of custom recipe type, you're probably going to you'll probably want to extend iRecipe or something else that extends. I can go ahead and show the hierarchy here. So you can see we've got iCrafting recipe, which is for crafting table stuff. You can see shaped and shapeless recipe both extend from that. This iShaped recipe, it's from Forge. I'm not entirely sure what that's for. Map extending recipe? Yeah, I don't actually know what that is. But abstract cooking recipe is the base for the furnace and everything else that's like that. So even the campfire has its own recipe system, and that extends the abstract cooking recipe. And the stonecutter uses this single item recipe class. Okay, so like I said, we're going to be implementing iCrafting recipe. So let's go ahead and implement the methods for this. And actually, would it be better to, I think it might be better to extend special recipe instead. So this one implements iCrafting recipe. The difference is that it has isDynamic true, which is what we want for this recipe because there's no set list of ingredients. So having it in the recipe book wouldn't do any good. And get recipe output, it's also set that to return item stack.empty. We could probably, I think we could actually change that in this case. So we're going to have to, actually, let's clear that out, do this again, because yeah, there are fewer methods we need to override. So we need to override matches, get crafting result, can fit, and get serializer. So can fit, we can just change to return true. Actually, kind of curious how this does it. Oh, okay. Width times height greater than or equal to 2. I guess we could do that as well. Okay, so now for the other methods, serializer. The serializer is going to be what reads the recipe from JSON, writes it to a packet buffer to send to the client when a client is connecting to the server, and also handles reading that data from the server so the client can know about the recipe. So we're going to have to create a serializer. For this recipe, it's going to be pretty simple since we don't really need to parse anything. So why don't we go ahead and do that? I normally create an inner class for this. So we'll just call that serializer, and this needs to, let me double check. Okay, so this part's a little bit odd. It needs to extend forge registry entry of iRecipe serializer. And yeah, I forgot about presentation mode. So go ahead and fix that. If I can remember how it changed. Okay, better? Better. So forge registry entry of iRecipe serializer of something. That question mark is just kind of a wild card, and I always read that as something. And of course I put the other window in presentation mode as well. Alright. And then we need to implement iRecipe serializer of our recipe type. To implement iRecipe serializer of recolor backpack recipe. Okay, so that's pretty long. Let's go over that again. So we're creating a class, we're extending forge registry entry of iRecipe serializer of something, and we're implementing iRecipe serializer of our recipe type. Okay, so let's go ahead and implement the methods. So there are 3 methods. So this first one is parsing JSON, and like I said, for this recipe, we don't actually need to do anything. So I'm just going to return a new instance of our recipe class. If you did need to parse something, you can use this JSON parameter to read the JSON. And actually, I probably need to add a constructor to this recipe. Yeah, okay. So then we will also need to pass in the recipe ID to the constructor. Okay, so the second read method is reading the data from the packet sent by the server to the client. So in this case, if you needed to send any information, you would do buffer dot and read whatever. You can read all kinds of primitive data types. You can read resource locations, I believe. Yeah, and text components. I think there's an item stack as well. Yeah, read item stack. So just whatever you need to send over. In this case, though, we don't need anything. So it's going to be pretty much the same as the previous method. And finally, in write, if you need to send over any information to the client, this is where you'll use the packet buffer and call its write methods to write whatever data you may need. And that needs to match up with the second read method. Everything has to be written and read in the same order. In this case, we're not doing anything, so the method is just empty. Okay, so let's actually create an instance of this serializer, and let's go ahead and create 2 constants here. So I'm going to do a resource location, call it name, and tutorialmod.getID, and we'll call this recolor backpack. We're not going to use that particular constant just yet, but we'll need that in a minute. And then another one, we're going to create an instance of our serializer equals new serializer. And in this case, I suppose you could also just do an anonymous class here since this is really short. But went ahead and just stuck with the actually defining a class down here. Okay, so we'll use both of those in a minute, but for right now, we need to write, need to return serializer down here. Don't forget that, or bad things will happen. Okay, so let's go ahead and start working on the matches. So this is where we're going to determine if the crafting inventory provided matches our recipe. So in this case, what we want is one and only one backpack and one or more dyes. So let's go ahead and create two integers. Or, yeah, we'll do it that way. So I'll do backpack count and dye count. And I guess do I need to initialize those? I think I do. All right. So now let's go ahead and we need to do an old-fashioned for loop for this. So I less than inventory.getSizeInventory. Okay, and then we're going to say item stack is assigned a value of inventory.getStack in slot I, and we're going to say if the stack is not empty, then we need to figure out what it is and increment the right variables, and if it's not an item we want, then we want to go ahead and just break out of the loop and return false immediately. Okay, so let's say the backpack first. This one should be pretty easy. So stack.getItem instance of backpack item. Then in that case, we're going to increment backpack count. Else, how do we tell if it's a dye? Is there a dye item? There is. Although it'd be nice if we could use tagged dyes as well. Let me see. Okay, so the dye tags. There's one for all the dyes, which will be forged dyes. So we could check for that. It's probably the best way to handle that. Okay, so we're going to say if stack.getItem.isIn tags.items.dyes. Then we're going to increment our dye counter. Otherwise, we have an item that it is not a backpack or a dye item, so we're going to return false. And if the stack is empty, that's okay. So then, like I said before, we want one backpack and at least one dye. Okay, so now we got just one more method to override. I'm going to go ahead and copy this for loop. And under getCraftingResult, let's go ahead and create an item stack called backpack and a collection of item stack called dyes. Okay, let's go ahead and paste in that for loop. So, same as before, we're iterating over the item stacks, but instead of trying to figure out if the recipe matches, we know it already does, so we just need to figure out what items we have and what to do with them. So if we've got a backpack, we want to store that in backpack. And if we've got a dye, we want to say dyes.addStack. Actually, I need to initialize that collection. Let's do a new array list. Okay, now we need to actually create the result of this recipe. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to copy the backpack, and this is important. We don't want to modify the one that's in the crafting grid. So we can just say backpack.copy. And actually, yeah, it's going to complain, so let's go ahead and initialize that with itemStack.empty. Okay, now I'm going to need to copy a little bit of code I think this should be mostly okay as it is. Obviously, there are a few things I need to change here. Let's go ahead and rename that to backpack. Okay, so we'll start the color off as white. Wait. Oh, yeah, okay. So what we want to do there is backpack item dot get backpack color. Okay. So now, let's see, I've got that method there. Okay, I think what I can change this to is dye color dot get color dye. Actually, that can return null, can't it? Yeah, okay. So let's say, let's extract that out and say if dye color is not equal to null. Now, realistically, that would never actually be null because we know that we're going to be passing in dyes, but if the IDE is giving me a warning, I fix it because you never know for sure. Okay, and then I need to change this to backpack item dot set backpack color. And I think that should be good. So again, this code is, it was originally copied from, I mentioned it last episode, armor dye recipe. Okay, I think, yeah, that function in particular was actually from here. Dyeable armor item dot, yeah, no one's set a mapping for this function. What would be a good name for that? I could probably set the mapping myself. Dye armor item, maybe? I don't know. I'll look into that later and maybe fix the mapping. But for right now, I think we're done with this recipe. So we've got matches, we've got get crafting result. Get crafting result is not finished. Okay, we need to call apply dyes result dyes, and then we can return the result. What's that warning? Too many source statements. Okay, I don't care about that. Alright, and that should be good, and we are returning our serializer. It's very easy to forget. I've done that many times. Okay, so let's go back to our mod recipes class, and in our init function, we need to register that serializer. So this will be, it's an iRecipe serializer now. Dot register. And I want to do recolor backpack recipe dot name. And since it's actually expecting a string, I did the constant as a resource location, but we're going to have to call toString on it anyway, so I guess you could have done a string, but I like resource locations. And then our serializer. You could also like create the serializer here if you wanted to. Personally, well, no, I guess it makes more sense to have it as a constant because you need to return it in the recipe anyway. Okay, so that should be all that we need to do there. There is one more thing that we need to do. Is there an easy way to create a file from here? Probably not. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can actually bring up the project window from here, so that'll work. So we need to go into resources, data, our mod ID, recipes, and we need to create a new file. Call this recolor backpack.json. And in here, we're just going to say type, tutorial, that's our mod ID, recolor backpack. And again, if you needed additional JSON, then you would just add it after the type, but we don't need anything in this case. So let's go ahead and try this out. Then we'll make a recipe to actually craft the backpacks themselves. Let's see, how long have I been recording? 23 minutes already. I was kind of thinking of doing a recipe where it takes the color from the wool. But I don't know if I want to do that right now. Okay, so let's try it out. Let's get a white backpack first. And try this out. Okay, so it looks like it may be blending with the white color that's already there. It's not quite what I wanted. Yeah, okay, why is it doing that? Oh, okay, I think I know. Yeah, I know why it's doing that. Yeah, let's say dyecolor.white.getFireworkColor, because the white is not actually pure white. Of course, they're in decimals, so can't really read them, but I'm pretty sure the white is not completely white. Okay, yeah. So that didn't quite go as I expected because the white dye color is a little bit off-white. But you can see now that the color blending is taking effect. And if we were to start with black, then we would get a darker result. So I don't know if that's the best way of handling that, but I think I've done enough on this for now. I'm not going to go ahead and... I'll probably add a recipe to craft the backpacks themselves off camera, because this has gone on a bit long already. So thank you for watching. Next time we'll do the actual inventory for the backpack. I'll see you then.